I starved, saved, and sacrificed my small world to make her dream true. But when I gave her the bracelet, she smiled gently and said another man had already given her something beyond what I ever could. I need to get this out before I lose what's left of my mind. 3 months ago, I was planning a proposal. Today, I'm writing this from a studio apartment that smells like regret and instant ramen. The bracelet cost me everything. Not just money, everything. Sarah had been dropping hints for months about this vintage sapphire bracelet she'd seen at Caldwell's Antiques downtown. She'd pause outside the shop window during our weekend walks, her fingers pressed against the glass like a kid at a candy store. "It's probably silly," she'd say, "but it just speaks to me." No. I knew. God, I knew everything about her. We'd been together 4 years, living together for 2. She worked as a teacher's aide making barely above minimum wage, pouring her heart into other people's kids because she couldn't afford the education degree she dreamed about. I was pulling double shifts at the warehouse, my back screaming every night, but I had a plan. The bracelet was $3,400. I had $190 in savings. So I started. No more takeout rice and beans every night. Cancelled my gym membership, my Netflix, even my phone plan. Downgraded to a flip phone from 2005 that Sarah thought was charmingly retro, but made me feel ancient at 28. I picked weekend shifts cleaning office buildings, scrubbing toilets until my knees went numb. Sarah noticed the changes, but I played it off. Just saving for our future, I'd tell her, kissing her forehead while she graded papers at our kitchen table. She'd smile, that trusting smile that could light our dim apartment. 3 months of living like a monk. 3 months of watching every penny. I even sold my dad's old guitar, the only thing I had left of him, after the cancer took him when I was 19. Got $400 for it at a pawn shop. The guy behind the counter looked at me like he knew I was desperate. I was. For her. The day I finally had enough saved, I called in sick to work. My hands were actually shaking as I walked into Caldwell's. The elderly owner, Mr. Caldwell, remembered me from all the times I'd stood outside with Sarah, probably looking like a. "For the young lady with the kind eyes?" he asked, already moving toward the display case. "For the woman I'm going to marry." I corrected him, and saying it out loud made it feel real. Made the sacrifices worth it. He wrapped it in this beautiful vintage box with cream ribbon. I spent the entire bus ride home rehearsing what I'd say. Not a proposal, not yet. But a promise. This is how much mean to me. Moment that would lead to the ring I was already planning to save for next. Sarah was on the couch when I got home, still in her work clothes, looking exhausted. She'd mentioned that morning how one of the kids in her class, little Marcus, had been acting out because his parents were divorcing. She always carried their pain home with her. "Rough day?" I asked, sitting beside her. "The roughest," she sighed, leaning into me. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm making any difference at all." Perfect timing. I pulled out the box, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I wanted to show how much difference make," I said, placing it in her hands. "How much mean to me?" Her eyes went wide, those beautiful brown eyes that used to look at me like I hung the moon. She opened the box so carefully, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. The bracelet caught the lamplight, sapphires glinting like captured stars. She lifted it with trembling fingers, and for a moment, just one perfect moment, I thought I'd gotten it right. Then her face changed. The wonder faded into something I'd never seen before. Guilt, pain. She looked at me with eyes suddenly full of tears, but not the good kind. Not joy tears. "Michael," she whispered, her voice breaking. This is beautiful. God, it's so beautiful." "Love it?" I asked, though something in my chest was already turning cold. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, I saw my whole world ending. "I can't keep it." 3 words, like bullets. "What? Why?" "Sarah, I saved for months. I know how much wanted." "That's just it." She set the bracelet back in the box like it was burning her fingers. "I know what this cost. I know how been living, how been sacrificing. And I can't accept this knowing." "Knowing what?" She was crying now, and I still didn't understand. Still thought maybe this was just overwhelming for her. That she felt guilty about the money. I could fix that. I could explain, "There's someone else." The apartment went silent except for the broken refrigerator's hum. Even that sounded like it was mocking me. "What? At school? Another teacher?" "James." She was looking at her hands now, not at me. "It started 3 weeks ago. Nothing physical, just talking, but then last week she reached into her purse. Pulled out a small jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a tree. Nothing fancy. Probably cost $50 at Target. But when she looked at it, her eyes lit the way they used to light when she looked at me. He said it reminded him of how I talked about wanting to grow things. How I wanted to help kids grow. He listened, Michael, really listened. I stared at that cheap necklace, and felt something break inside me that I didn't even know existed. I listened, I said, my voice coming out hoarse. I've been listening for 4 years. Listened to what I said I wanted. But he heard who I am. The worst part. She was right. I'd been so focused on getting her the bracelet she mentioned, on being the provider, that I'd stopped seeing her. Really seeing her. I'd turned our relationship into a transaction. I give expensive gifts, she stays happy. I don't love him yet. She continued. And somehow that made it worse. And I could. And that means I don't love the way deserve anymore. She stood, smoothing down her skirt like we were finishing a business meeting. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry. A good man. Deserve someone who looks at the way I look at, the way I used to look at. She packed that night. 4 years in cardboard boxes and garbage bags. I sat on the couch holding that vintage box, wondering if Mr. Caldwell would take the bracelet back. The next morning, I found the cheap necklace on the counter. She'd left it behind. For 3 days, I stared at it, trying to understand how something so simple had undone everything I'd built. Then I put it on. I've been wearing it for 3 months now, under my work shirts where no one can see. It reminds me that love isn't about the size of the sacrifice. It's about seeing the person you're sacrificing for. I learned that too late. Sarah texted me last week. She's engaged to James. They're having a small ceremony this spring. She wanted me to hear it from her first. The bracelet is still in my sock drawer. Still in that beautiful box with the cream ribbon. Sometimes I take it out and wonder what mine would look like, if I'd bought her a packet of seeds instead. If I'd listened to who she was instead of what she said she wanted. If I'd paid attention to the woman I loved instead of the fantasy I was trying to buy. The comments on my last post destroyed me. But not in the way'd think. Half of told me I was in. The other half said Sarah was heartless for leaving someone who sacrificed so much. Both sides missed the point entirely, just like I did. I wasn't the victim in my story. I was the problem. But instead of learning from that realization, I decided to prove just how much worse I could make things. After Sarah left, I had 2 choices: grow from this and become better, or everything down and blame the world. Guess which one I picked? I lasted exactly 2 weeks before I downloaded every dating app known to mankind. Bumble, Hinge, even Farmers Only, because apparently rock bottom has a basement. My profile was a masterpiece of pity, recently single after 4 years. Looking for someone who appreciates genuine gestures. Translation: I'm emotionally unavailable and will definitely use to feel better about. The matches came fast. Turns out, wounded guys with sob stories are catnip to certain types of people. Within a month, I was juggling conversations with 7 different women, each one getting a slightly different version of my tragic tale. There was Melissa, the nurse who worked nights and texted me during her breaks. She thought I was romantic and old-fashioned. I let her believe I was single by choice, taking time to heal. There was Rachel, who'd been cheated on by her ex-husband and connected with my story about betrayal. I conveniently left out the part where I was the one who'd emotionally checked out first. And then there was Amy. Amy was everything Sarah wasn't. Flashy where Sarah was understated. Loud where Sarah was thoughtful. She drove a red convertible her daddy bought her, and wore heels to the grocery store. At 25, she'd never had a relationship last longer than 6 months, and she wore that like a badge of honor. I don't do boring, she announced on our first date, which should have been a red flag the size of Texas. Instead I heard, I won't leave for someone more interesting. Our second date was at an expensive steakhouse downtown. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without looking at prices. When the check came, she didn't even reach for her purse. Thanks, she said, touching her lipstick while I calculated how many extra shifts this dinner would cost me. Such a gentleman. I should have felt used. Instead, I felt needed. Amy required things from me: expensive dinners, weekend trips, constant validation. Sarah had needed my emotional presence. Amy needed my wallet. Somehow, that felt easier. 3 months in, Amy started hinting about moving in together. My lease is in January. She mentioned over drinks at a rooftop bar that cost more than my monthly food budget. And honestly, staying at place all the time is getting old. That studio is so compact. She said, compact. The way most people say, sewage. I've been thinking about upgrading anyway. I lied. The studio was all I could afford after Sarah and I split our old place's expenses. But Amy's smile when I said it was like a. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in Amy's preferred neighborhood. The rent was double what I'd been paying. My savings account, slowly rebuilding from the bracelet disaster, flatlined overnight. But Amy loved it. She squealed when she saw the walk-in closet and immediately started planning how to decorate. She never offered to contribute to rent, and I never asked. I was too scared she'd leave if I brought money. Meanwhile, I was still texting the other women. Not because I wanted to cheat on Amy, but because I was terrified of being alone with my thoughts. Every spare moment got filled with meaningless conversations and half-hearted plans I never intended to keep. Melissa started getting suspicious when I kept canceling our dates. Rachel began asking why I never wanted to meet in person anymore. I was juggling lies like a circus performer, and just like any circus act, it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The crash came on a Tuesday night in February. Amy had gone out with her girlfriends, leaving me alone in our expensive apartment with nothing but premium cable I couldn't afford and furniture we'd bought on credit. I was scrolling through my phone, mindlessly chatting with 3 different women, when Amy's key turned in the lock. She was not tipsy, not buzzed, stumbling, mascara smeared, one heel missing. "Baby," she shrieked, throwing herself at me. I missed so much. Her purse spilled when she dropped it, contents scattering across our overpriced hardwood floors. Among the usual debris of makeup and receipts, her phone landed screen. The notification that lit made my freeze. "Jamie's can't wait to see tomorrow. Tonight was amazing." For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Wrong person, old message, anything but what it obviously was. "Amy," I said, my voice coming out. "Who's James?" She looked at her phone, then at me, then back at her phone. The drunken joy drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "Oh," she said. "Just oh, that's it, oh." She straightened, and suddenly she didn't seem anymore. "Look, Michael, it's not what think. Really, because I think you're cheating on me with someone named James, and I think tonight was amazing for 2. It's complicated. 3 words. Different from Sarah's 3 words, but they hit just as hard. Complicated how?" Amy sat down heavily on our expensive couch, the one we'd bought with a credit card that was now maxed out. "He's someone I knew before. We have history. And lately things between us have been, are always working or tired, and he just what? He makes me laugh. He takes me places. Real places, not chain restaurants with coupon nights." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been working extra shifts to pay for her lifestyle, and she was complaining that I was always working. I'd been taking her to expensive places I couldn't afford, and she was insulting me for trying to save money. But the worst part, I recognized the look on her face. It was the same look Sarah had when she told me about her teacher friend. The look of someone who'd already left emotionally, but hadn't found the courage to leave physically. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. While I'd been picking extra shifts to pay for our overpriced apartment. While I'd been declining invitations from friends because we couldn't afford to go out. While I'd been lying to 7 other women about being ready for something real. "I want to leave," I said. "Michael, wait. We can talk about this. We can work it out. Like Sarah and I worked it out." Amy's face went blank. "Who's Sarah?" In that moment, I realized Amy had never actually listened to my story. She'd heard recent breakup. And, looking for someone new. But she'd never heard the details. She didn't know about the bracelet or the sacrifices or the lesson I was supposed to have learned. She didn't know me at all, and I didn't know her either. "Pack things," I said tonight. Amy started crying, but they weren't real tears. They were performance tears, designed to make me feel guilty for ending things. I'd seen Sarah cry genuine heartbreak and regret. This was nothing like that. She packed quickly, efficiently. Most of the expensive clothes I'd watched her buy with her daddy's money. Most of the decorations she'd insisted we needed. When she was done, our apartment looked like a furniture showroom, expensive pieces with no personality. "We'll regret this," she said at the door, her mascara still smeared but her voice steady. I could have been good for. After she left, I sat in that overpriced apartment surrounded by furniture I'd gone into debt to buy. And I realized something devastating. I'd become the cheater. Not physically, maybe, but emotionally. I'd been stringing along multiple women while living with Amy. I'd been using all of them to avoid dealing with my own brokenness. I'd learned nothing from losing Sarah. Absolutely nothing. Worse, I'd somehow managed to get cheated on again, while being emotionally unfaithful. The universe had a sense of humor that would make a comedian weep. I checked my phone. 17 unread messages from various dating apps. Women who thought I was single, available, healing. Women I'd been lying to for months while playing house with someone who'd been lying to me. I deleted every app. Blocked every number. Sat in the silence of my expensive mistakes and finally let feel the full weight of what I'd become. Sarah had cheated, but she'd been honest about it. She'd felt guilty, ended things cleanly, tried to minimize the damage. I'd turned into someone who cheated while being cheated on, who lied while being lied to, who used people while being used. I'd become everything I'd hated about my situation with Sarah, multiplied by 7. The lease on this place runs through December. I can't afford it alone, but I can't afford to break it either. So I'm stuck here for 10 more months, surrounded by reminders of how spectacularly I can destruct when given the opportunity. Last week, I saw Sarah at the grocery store. She was with James, and they were buying ingredients for what looked like a home-cooked meal. She looked happy. Genuinely, peacefully happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. She saw me too. Gave me a small, sad smile and a wave. James looked curious but not. He had no reason to be. I wanted to tell her I was sorry. Not for the bracelet or the breakup, but for everything I'd become since then. For proving that her instincts about me were right. Instead, I nodded back and pretended I had somewhere important to be. I didn't. I never do anymore. I thought hitting rock bottom meant there was nowhere left to fall. Turns out, rock bottom has a trapdoor. After Amy left, I convinced I was done making terrible decisions. I'd learned my lesson about emotional cheating, about using people as bandages for my broken ego. I was going to focus on, pay off my debts, maybe even go to therapy. That lasted exactly 18 days. On day 19, I met Emma at a coffee shop near my work. She was reading a book about sustainable gardening. And something about that reminded me of Sarah's dream of growing things, of helping things grow. Emma was different from Amy, quiet, thoughtful, working as a social worker with kids in foster care. She drove a 10-year-old Honda and split every check down to the penny. When I told her about my recent breakup, singular, not plural, she listened without trying to fix me or use my pain as entertainment. Sometimes we have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters, she said, stirring her coffee with a wooden stick instead of plastic. Even her environmental consciousness felt authentic. For 3 weeks, I thought maybe I'd finally found it. The real thing. Emma was everything Sarah had been plus everything Amy wasn't. She was building a purpose while I was still demolishing mine, but somehow she saw something in me worth saving. Then Melissa showed at my apartment. I'd blocked her number months ago, but I'd never told her where I lived. Apparently, she'd done some detective work. Or maybe I'd been careless one night during my Amy period. The details don't matter. What matters is the look on her face when she saw Emma leaving my building. So this is why I've been ghosting me, Melissa said. Her nurse scrubs wrinkled from a double shift. Found someone new to lie to. Emma stopped walking, turned around, looked between Melissa and me like she was watching a puzzle solve itself in real time. Excuse me, Emma said, her voice dangerously calm. Oh, honey. Melissa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Don't know do. About Rachel. About the other 3 he was texting while he was telling me he was taking time to heal. The world went quiet except for traffic and my heartbeat trying to break my ribs. Emma looked at me. Really looked at me. I saw the exact moment she understood that everything between us had been built on lies I'd told months before I even met her. Michael, she said, and my name in her mouth sounded like a funeral. Is this true? I could have lied. Should have lied. Melissa had no proof, just accusations from a woman scorned. But looking at Emma's face, seeing the same trust Sarah used to have in me, I couldn't do it anymore. Yes, I said. 2 letters. 1 word, the truth finally. Emma nodded like she'd expected it. How many others? 7. I whispered. While we're with Amy too. Yes. Melissa's anger evaporated into something that looked like pity. Oh Michael, are so much sicker than I thought. Emma didn't cry. Didn't yell. Didn't throw anything or call me names. She just looked at me for a long moment, then walked to her car and drove away. That should have been the end of it. Emma was gone, Melissa had closure, and I was finally alone with the consequences of my choices. Finally ready to actually work on. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. 3 days later, my sister called. We hadn't talked in months because I'd been too wrapped in my drama to maintain family relationships, but her voice on the phone was shaking. Michael, I need to tell something, and you're going to me for it. What's wrong? It's about Sarah. My went cold. What about Sarah? She came to see me. Last week. She wanted to talk to someone who knew, who could help her understand what went wrong between two. Jesus, Lisa, didn't tell her about Amy, about the others. No. But Michael, she told me things. About relationship, things never mentioned. What things? Lisa was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung. She was pregnant. She finally said. The phone slipped from my hand. Hit the floor with a that matched something breaking in my chest. What? 2 years ago. She was pregnant. She lost the baby at 8 weeks, and she said never noticed she was grieving. That kept working extra shifts and making plans for expensive things while she was falling apart. I couldn't breathe. Literally could not get air into my lungs. She said she tried to tell how much she needed to just be present with her, but thought she wanted space to heal, so gave her space. And more space. Until the space became a canyon between, 2 years ago. I remembered Sarah being quieter than usual, sadder. I'd asked if she was okay, and she'd said she was fine, just tired. I'd believed her because it was easier than digging deeper. I'd worked more shifts because I thought providing financially was the same as providing emotionally. Michael, are there? Why didn't she tell me? She did try, but we're so focused on saving money for that bracelet, on grand gestures and future plans, that missed her present pain. I thought about all those months of sacrifice. All those extra shifts and cancelled subscriptions and rice and beans dinners. While Sarah was grieving a baby I never knew existed, I was working into the ground to buy her jewelry. She said the teacher James, he noticed she was sad before she ever told him why. He brought her tea when she was having bad days, asked questions, made space for her feelings instead of trying to fix them with things. Stop. I said. She wanted me to tell that she never meant to, that she knows loved her. But love without presence is just good intentions, and good intentions don't heal broken hearts. I hung, sat on my overpriced couch in my overpriced apartment, and finally understood the full scope of what I'd lost. Sarah hadn't left me for another man. She'd left me for another chance at being truly seen. I'd spent 4 years loving the idea of her while missing the actual her. I'd noticed what she pointed at in store windows but missed the grief in her eyes. I'd heard her words but not her silences. I'd provided everything except what she actually needed. And when she found someone who offered presence instead of presence, she took it. The baby we lost. The baby I never knew about because I was too busy being a provider to be a partner. I called in sick to work for a week. Spent 7 days going through old photos of Sarah and me, looking for signs I'd missed. They were everywhere. Pictures where her smile didn't reach her eyes. Moments where she was looking away from the camera, lost in thought I'd never bothered to ask about. In one photo from that time 2 years ago, she was sitting on our old couch holding her stomach, in a way that suddenly seemed protective rather than casual. How had I not seen it? How had I lived with someone for 4 years and missed something so huge, easy? I'd been so focused on who I wanted her to be that I'd stopped seeing who she actually was. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is James. Sarah told me might want to talk. I'm not enemy, and she's not mine to protect. But she loved deeply, and I think should know that. Coffee sometime. I stared at that message for 2 hours before responding. Yes, we met the next day at a neutral place downtown. James was nothing like I'd expected. Not taller or handsomer or richer, just present. When he talked, he looked at me. When I talked, he listened like my words mattered. She cried for months after leaving, he said. Not because she regretted it, but because she mourned what two could have been if things had been different. Different how? If, been there for who she was instead of who thought she should be. He told me about finding her crying in her classroom, that first day they really talked. About how she'd mentioned having a boyfriend who loved her but didn't see her. About how she'd never intended to fall for anyone else but found herself opening to someone who asked about her feelings instead of her list. The baby. I said. James nodded. She told Pi. My sister told me. Sarah tried, but I missed it. She said we're working so hard to give her everything that forgot to give her. We sat in silence for a while. Finally James spoke again. She's happy now. Really happy. I wanted to know that, not to, but because I think part of needs to hear it. It does. And Michael. She forgives. She wanted me to tell that too. She knows we're trying to love her the only way knew how. After James left, I sat in that coffee shop until they closed, understanding finally that some mistakes can't be fixed. Some chances don't come twice. Some people leave and stay gone not because they stopped loving, but because loving was them. I broke my lease the next day. Moved back to the studio apartment, sold the expensive furniture for a fraction of what I'd paid. Deleted all my social media accounts where I'd been pretending my was something it wasn't. I started therapy. Real therapy with a real therapist who calls me on my patterns and doesn't let me play victim to my own choices. It's been 6 months since Emma walked away. 4 months since I learned about the baby. 3 months since I met James and finally understood the full weight of what I'd done. Sarah got married last weekend. I know because mutual friends posted pictures. She looked radiant in a simple dress, surrounded by the kids from her school who served as flower girls and ring bearers. James's face in those pictures showed the kind of love I thought I'd had for her but never really understood. I sent her a card. Not to the wedding, but to her school afterwards. Just 3 lines. Congratulations on finding real happiness. I'm sorry for all the ways I missed when were right in front of me. Deserved better then, and I'm glad found it now. She never responded. She didn't need to. I'm writing this from my studio apartment at 2 a.m., wearing that cheap necklace she left behind 3 years ago. The one that taught me the difference between giving someone what they ask for, and giving them what they actually need. Tomorrow I start a new job. Not warehouse work, but something with actual people. A crisis helpline where presence matters more than paychecks. Where listening is the only skill that counts. I'm learning, finally, how to show for people instead of just showing off for them. But it's too late for Sarah. Too late for Emma. Too late for all the women I used as emotional bandages, while I was bleeding out from wounds I refused to acknowledge. Some lessons cost everything to learn, and even then, don't get to use them with the people who taught them to. The bracelet is still in my sock drawer. Sometimes I take it out and remember the man who thought love was about the size of the sacrifice instead of the depth of the presence. That man destroyed everything he touched while convinced he was saving it. This is my last update. Some will say I deserve everything that happened, or right. Some will say I can still fix this. Or wrong. This isn't a story about redemption. It's a warning label on emotional unavailability disguised as grand gestures. Learn from my mistakes because can't learn from own once it's too late. Final reflection written in notebook. Never posted. The worst part isn't that I lost Sarah. The worst part is that I never really had her. Because I never learned how to have anyone. I loved the idea of being in love more than I loved the work of actually loving someone. And now I know the difference, but I'm the only one left to love that way.